Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program. It's a Wednesday morning and of course you and I are together for the next hour and a half. On the show today we're going to be doing a book review. The book is called Hope and the author is Ravona Sauls. We're also going to be looking at girl and boy mentorship. There's many foundations around and one of those foundations is called Chai and Zeus Youth Foundation. They'll come in and talk about the importance of mentoring young girls and boys. And not a moment too soon, hot on the heels of the Parktown Boys tragedy. As we all know, this has become headline news throughout South Africa and beyond. A youngster was drowned on a school camp, and we're going to be looking at issues around school excursions. Should they be happening? Why do they happen? What happens at these excursions? We're going to be looking at indemnity forms, and we're also going to be looking at safety. How paramount, how much importance is put on the safety of these children? And what if you as a parent decide that you don't want your child to go on a school excursion? Is it going to marginalize your child? Or is that against the school's rules? Would they absolutely insist that the child has to go on an excursion simply because it's part of the whole learning experience? Dr. Shaida Umar from the Teddy Bear Clinic is in studio to talk to us about all of these issues, about peer pressure, about bullying, about everything I've talked about in my introduction and much, much more. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran dalilan for having me on.
Lovely to have you on because this is something very close to your heart, being the director of the Teddy Bear Clinic. Children and their safety is paramount as far as you and your organization is concerned. You must have been horrified when you heard about this tragedy.
So indeed, I think it's a tragedy of note. The loss and death of one child is one too many. Absolutely. And just under the circumstances under which it occurred is absolutely soul-destroying, heart-wrenching, and our condolences to the Mpianzi family.
Shaida, the questions that I think the whole of South Africa is asking is, there's also a talk about there were several hours that passed before it was noticed that the child was missing, and only then were the authorities alerted. And then also how many teachers or team members were involved in this excursion. Another question was, did they kind of check whether the youngsters on excursion were able to swim or not? Then they talk about these rafts that they built. How sturdy were the rafts? Who inspected that they were safe enough to go onto the water? So those are a number of questions that are being bandied about. And another question that has just surfaced now is the responsibility of the venue or the campsite. Where and how do they fit into the bigger picture?
So I think just to give an overview of what happened. So on Wednesday last week, the children went on the camp. They arrived, they had lunch, and then they got immediately involved thereafter in the raft making activity.
Which was a team building exercise.
Team building exercise. If we look at skills of learning and development, the acronym SOLD, SOLD, it's about skills of learning and development, which looks not only at team building, it looks at communication skills, it looks at opportunities of children coming from adversity, children, addressing individual variabilities.
Different backgrounds.
But an opportunity for personal growth and development. So that was the objective and the rationale behind this. And there were 16 groups, and they had to pick up from the bush bamboo, stones, laces, shoelaces, and create this raft which had to go into the river. And of course the boys then went into the river. As they turned, they saw this torrential current, which was, and of course, according to the information received, that some of them had capsized, and of course they were reaching out to rescue each other. It seemed like internally it was the boys. The educators, the teachers, were actually not part of this activity. It was the camp officials that
okay.
were engaged and involved in this activity. And some of the boys, the one boy was more active. They were, in rescuing, but could not rescue the deceased. He saw the deceased going further and further away. However, they did raise the alarm. What happened and why people did not respond? Because what is actually quite alarming and concerning is that immediately after this, when some of them went onto riverbanks and tried to get to a place of safety. However, you raised the issue around roll call. They were informed that there was, they were not sure. There were 10 people missing, and then the one person that had not returned. But what is actually really worrying is that they then got ready to start their hike. So
the child was not, it wasn't noticed that there was a child missing. So what about head count? Don't you do this as a matter of course?
Indeed. There are so many red flags, unanswered questions. And as you are fully aware that it was hours later. In fact, as I understand that parents were contacted during that process to check if their child had actually come on camp.
Oh my word.
So, just imagine the anguish, the fear, the anxieties that was instilled in all the other parents as well.
That should
not
never have
knowing
happened.
about the safety of their child, the well-being of their child. And if one had to just look at the faces of those parents when their children returned that morning, that huge wave of relief, but also just being in a total state of shock and disbelief that this has happened or this is happening now. Looking at those processes, I think if we look at the indemnity there, because of course they have to sign, and the school has specific clauses and conditions in the indemnity forms indicating that you will be, necessary safety precautions will be ensured, but you are sending your child at your own risk, indemnifying against educators, against the school, and then they require all medical information. So, if we just break it down to basics, the school is actually protected and absolved. And sometimes, if you look at some of the forms, it's quite technical or legal jargon, and English is not everybody's first language, so it may not even be understood by people. And of course, for want of a better word, is people do not want to appear to be stupid or not understanding the contents. So these are real concerns that obviously one needs to revisit in terms of policies, procedures, both regionally, provincially and nationally, because schools are in crisis in South Africa.
I want to come back to indemnity forms, but I do need to make this statement, and I'd like to hear your response. Part-time boys' school doesn't need this tragedy on their name. Not especially since last year they had that horrible scandal with the polo coach where a number of boys were sexually assaulted. It begs the question, how could that have happened under the principal's watch? Surely or you try and monitor and see what's going on in and around your school. And prior to that, Parktown Boys and a host of other schools have also been in the spotlight for issues around bullying. But we're going to come back to those two issues in a little while. Let's look at indemnity forms. Does it truly protect the school completely and absolve them of absolutely all responsibility?
So, Julie, if you just look at, I think it's important that I even actually read this to you. Most of these indemnities incorporate legal terminology that many people don't understand, and it speaks to consent, that the person in charge of the child acts in loco parentis, meaning in the place of a parent, that whilst in their care, all tours and excursions shall be taken at your child's own risk, that you indemnify the school, including its teachers, staff, employees, volunteers, servants or agents from any and all claims that may arise in connection with damage or loss that may arise to your child during the tour or excursion or whilst in their care. A parent is also asked to indemnify and absolve the school against any damage, loss, injury, expense and costs suffered or incurred by the child in or on the school premises in the course of any extramural activity the child participates in. I mean, that's just in short.
You're signing away your life. But that being said, the way forward for these parents, and, I kind of wonder at, the school absolving. Yeah, I guess they need to protect themselves as well. But then where to from here for those parents? And what about a child or parents who decide that because of risks involved, I'm not sure. Look, an accident can happen anywhere. It can happen on a family outing. Indeed. But I am not going to take a chance and I'm not going to send my child on any excursions. Is that going to marginalize the child? Is that going to hamper the child's future learning and development?
So you're asking such pertinent questions because one needs to look at the holistic well-being of their child and looking at the context as well. You raised the most important point of marginalization. So whilst there might be, substantial factors that could motivate the absence of their child not going out on that outing for medical reasons, whatever, the child would still be not seen favorably by the team, by the peers, and the kind of responses that could be elicited would certainly be injurious, harmful, and erode the self-esteem of the child.
So it's like bullying. Overt or otherwise. Let's hold that thought. And I'm also thinking about the role of the teachers, because I think teachers, when they come across a child like this, that is possibly protected due to the fears of the parents, they also tend to lose interest in that child. So the child suffers a double whammy.
Indeed. The child is actually seen as somebody that's not good enough, and there's a lack of or sense of belonging, rejection, which could be quite detrimental to the child's well-being, performance, etc.
Let's go for an ad break. We'll come back to talk about bullying, marginalization, and the roles parents need to take as far as this is concerned. Dr. Shaida Umar is in studio talking to us about, obviously, the tragedy at one of the pupils from Parktown Boys High School, drowned on a school excursion. And this, of course, brings up a whole host of questions around your child's safety, your child's well-being at a school, and also as far as extramural activities are concerned. So we'll be looking into that in much more detail right after the ad break. Dr. Shaida Umar from the Teddy Bear Clinic is in studio talking school excursions, indemnity forms, safety, bullying, and a whole host more. Shaida, your role with this whole situation, I know that you were at a press conference with Panyaza Lesufi and other role players. When, how does you and your organization come into the picture?
Okay, so we have a long-standing working relationship with the MEC's office from the Gauteng Department of Education, and we usually form part of their rapid risk assessment team. However, regarding the loss and tragedy of this young boy at Parktown Boys, we were requested to come in and provide psychosocial support, to provide debriefing and containment to the learners that were part of this group that had gone on the excursion, and to their families, to reach out to them in terms of providing the counseling and support that they so rightfully deserved.
Undoubtedly, they're very, very traumatized, as are the teachers that went on the excursion. They probably feel horribly hopeless, helpless, guilty that they didn't possibly should have done more to have ensured the safety of the entire team.
Absolutely. I think one needs to also factor into account that there were some new educators that were on board. So it was not the same educators that had worked on these camps before. So the trauma and obviously this shocking tragedy was something that impacted on everybody at every level. The learners certainly, as you've identified, the myriad of feelings and emotions, this whole gamut of emotions from shock, disbelief, denial, fear, anxiety, and of course the guilt, feeling that they did not do enough, blaming, feeling responsible to a certain degree that we should have. Hindsight we know is not an exact science, and it's always easy to be clever afterwards. So feeling as if they've even let down the family of the deceased Enoch Mpianzi, and the sense of powerlessness and not being able to rescue and save. So I think it's so much. If we just look at the tender ages that we're dealing with, your 13-year-olds and 14-year-old boys having to go through this whole wave of emotions and processing what has happened is something totally devastating and soul-destroying.
So undoubtedly the support from your organization will be ongoing for a little while anyway.
Indeed, I think one needs to, realize there's no quick fix solution here. And how long is a piece of string? Each child is going to respond differently to the trauma. And I think something we need to also appreciate is that this present trauma is likely to evoke past traumatic experiences. And, of course, as a result, any other trauma that the learners may have suffered or been inflicted with in the past could be suddenly something that becomes uncontrollable, something that they cannot work through, and therefore it is critical that counseling support is provided. And as I say, each child will respond differently. So some children may take longer, some children may require it at different phases, different stages in their lives. It will vary.
We also talked about marginalization of children. So parents who now decide, I'm not sending my children on excursions any longer. Let's look at the marginalization and bullying, and very especially at an all-boys school. Early on, off air, we were talking about toxic masculinity. Let's look at that issue and how do you... Something needs to be done. We're raising a very angry nation. We're raising very angry young men. What is going on?
So if we just look, I think the socially constructed ideology and concept of masculinity, the stereotype that is attached to masculinity, and often masculinity is misunderstood and misrepresented. It becomes synonymous with aggression and violation of rights. And if we look at the boys' schools, this is something that is rife, and what we are seeing is the male dominance, where during the orientation period, the initiation or hazing that takes place, where of course they exert, or the idea is mentorship and transferability of social skills. However, what we're finding that instead of assertion or assertiveness skills, aggression seems to come into play.
aggression and ridicule,
humiliation,
and shame,
degradation,
absolutely,
physical, psychological harm, breaking down the individual. So what we actually
for life.
So what we're finding that there's this pattern and cycle of violence that the younger learners are feeding into this because they want acceptance, approval, and wanting to belong to this group at all cost, sometimes at the cost of self-sacrifice, and start identifying with the aggressor, the typical Stockholm syndrome. In order to assume a sense of power and control, you start feeding into that typical trauma bonding that we are finding. And we find, like yesterday I was talking to Eusebius Mackay on 702, and he highlighted the situation of a very successful CEO of one of the top corporate companies, and being absolutely wonderful throughout his life, but being, suddenly being responsible for femicide. And going back into the trajectory or the history, we find that this person was actually part of the bullying, as you described, and feeding into that toxic masculinity, which is often the structural drivers of violence.
Now, I know we've digressed slightly, but we're trying to paint a background to show that if we try and take our child out of the equation of a school excursion, or to protect them from initiation ceremonies, this is what could result. They could be could be bullied, and the repercussions could live with them for the rest of their lives.
So we need to understand that, because if we look at all these schools, and you raise the issue of the toxic masculinity, what we need to see is that the rituals, the rites, R-I-T-E-S, rites have become wrong. Rights have gone wrong, and I think
badly wrong, horribly wrong.
Indeed.
What does that say about co-ed and girls' schools? That's not to say that our girls are not exempt from this, or they don't get involved in this type of activities.
So with girls, one finds it's more subtle, it's more passive-aggressive, it's not physically aggressive. With girls, there'd be lots of bullying, the emotional abuse that often occurs, and the focus will be on physical appearances.
Absolutely.
About, aesthetic features, and looking at dispositions, body dispositions. So looking at that person being fat. And I shared this, something that we've experienced where girls say, she looks like that because she eats bread or she eats pop. That's the kind of references, negative references that are made. So it's also quite injurious, but it's more subtle.
Where to from here as far as the Department of Education is concerned regarding indemnities, school excursions? And even though Parktown boys are protected by this indemnity, what's the recourse for the family of the youngster that has drowned?
So, as we are aware that the Human Rights Commission are going to be representing the family, the legal representation, and they are currently working, and I know they tried to make access to the site yesterday. They went on a visit. They were denied access for whatever reason, because it's under investigation. So, where to from here? Of course, I think this is a very complex, multifaceted, deep concern. I think it's long-standing, but it's going to require, it's not a quick fix, it's going to require systemic intervention. So Department of Basic Education, yes, looking at policies and procedures, but one is going to have to work on different levels, working with the educational institutions, with school governing bodies, with learners themselves. So it's a long drawn process. There have been, I did some reading, and we know that the Department of Basic Education had a legal suit against them previously.
I think someone from a learner from Kimberley also died in a drowning incident there about 10 years ago.
That is
correct.
That
being said, China, we can't shut down excursions, because I'm sure you'll agree with me, it is part of the learning and development of the child.
Absolutely.
So And you can't, as I've also said earlier on, you can go on a family outing and you can have a tragedy. So, and these things do happen and will continue happening. Please God, let's pray and hope that we don't have such tragedies going forward. But how does one ensure, there are no guarantees, but how does one, what more precautions can be and should be taken?
So I think there are many lessons to be learned here. This is an opportunity to turn this crisis into something more rigorous, to minimize risk factors and enhance the protective factors. If we just unpack what happened here, there were many risk factors. Obviously, one needs to also ensure that there's proper protocols in place, and rigorous briefing processes before, and also opening it up to parent bodies to say, come on board, accompany, chaperone your child. But there are so many things one needs to take into account, even in terms of educators, because camp counselors don't actually have a relationship with the learners or the child. Mm-hmm. So it is critical that educators, if it's a new educator, whatever, in terms of their orientation processes, they need to connect with the learners before they actually go on the camp. They need to know more about each learner, and there needs to be a backer-buddy system as well.
Absolutely.
So, where one takes care of two takes care of one. But if they both in a risky situation, 3 and 4 will come into the rescue. So there needs to be a lot more thought and detailed planning around these processes. It requires a lot of hard work and planning.
And that's where we have to leave it. Your closing statement for the morning.
I think my closing statement is that we shouldn't shy away from sending children to tours and excursions, provided one is actually aware of the risks, and one needs to not be afraid of asking the relevant questions.
And that's where we leave it. Time for an ad break. Don't go away. We'll be back with you in a minute or two. And we now have 2 young men in studio. They're passionate about youth development, youth empowerment for both boys and girls. They run an NPO called the Chaya and Zeus Foundation. It's all about giving back, paying it forward, and making sure that we raise healthy young South Africans going forward. We have Wandile Mabaso, who is the MD, and Brian Cole, who is the president. And of course, you guys are not newcomers to the show. You've been here once before, talking about your book at the time. Yes. This time around, you're talking about something very close to both your hearts, and that is youth and taking them to the next level. Obviously, showing them their worth, realizing their worth, and making something of their lives. Yes. Let me start with you, Wandile. You were in the travel industry, and then you are very passionate and decided to give back by getting involved in early childhood development.
That's correct.
What moved you into that direction?
Well, bearing in mind travel, I had always been passionate, right? So how the idea came about, really, I found myself at home because my mom runs a small daycare.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And at that point, I was obviously looking at profits, but passion at the same time did drive me. So I figured, what is it that I can do for the young kids at home? And then it obviously clicked that how about we formulate, take the syllabus outside and take these kids to learn what they actually see.
All right. You guys are at the coalface of the youth, disempowerment, the issue around possibly a lost generation going forward. So we look back 10, 20, 30 years and say, we are guilty because we've let our youth down. You are able to touch X amount of youth. What are the absolute burning issues in the townships? And the two of you, I know your hearts are in the right place, but you can't, as much as you'd like to, you can't touch all the lives.
Exactly.
What drives you, and what is at the coalface? What is the burning issues in the townships?
Personally, I grew up in the township. Fortunately, thank God for that, because
It makes you stronger.
It made me the person that I am today, and I'm grateful for that.
And you understand the dynamics.
120%.
And you're able to tackle the issues.
Very, very much so, because I've realized that as young people, we grow up with other older people who are full of excuses. So we grew up having excuses. So how then do we come up and say, you know, how do we develop a young person who is inspired and fearless with no excuse? So for me, that was very critical, especially that now we're moving to an era of industrial revolution. Can you imagine if a boy can't even read or a girl can't even read, how far are they going to go into this era of industrial revolution? I saw on the news just 2 days or a day ago that the UK is no more buying coal from South Africa, which basically means now we have to come up with different options of thinking. We need to come up with different ways of thinking so we can create a different country, so we can create different young people who think differently, and we can create what we say, money. Because without money, then our young people, where are they going to go? And without them being able to create careers that will able to give them money, where are they going to go? So for me, it's important that a young person is inspired, full of confidence, know where they are going, and from there they can take care of their own lives. Because if you've got that, if you know where you're going, you're confident about it, you've got a goal because you know where you're going, then life becomes a little bit easier. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, because to achieve your goals, it's not an easy step.
It's hard work.
It's very hard work. You need to put in the work. You know, if you put in the work, you'll get something out of it. But it's beautiful to have a direction. It's the most important thing for me, that these young people, just like me, nobody looked at me when I was growing up. I want to look at them. I invite them to say, guys, let me show you how to swim. And we show them how to swim. We invite them and say, guys, let's show you how to write vision boards. Let's put goals on you, and let's put goals on paper. Show them how to do it practically, not just tell them what to do.
You're obviously talking about pre and young teens.
Yes.
You talk early childhood development. How do you marry the two? And is your work, even though you're partners, you're the MD and you are obviously the president, how do you marry your two roles in making this foundation the success that it is?
Yeah. Well, see, bearing in mind how the Child Zeus came about, we were trying to grow that early childhood development. Yes, we'll still... by some chance, from the early childhood development, take them on excursions. It's leisure for them, right? But there's a lot of problems that the youth actually face. You know, you'd be surprised that in South Africa, at this day and age, you'll find a child being teased because they don't have school uniform, you know, which to a certain extent, it's some of the issues we can deal with, you know. So that's how Brian was like, no, you know what, let's at least try burst further, you know. Let's try deal with some of the issues that some of the youth would understand. This coming 5th of Feb, we've got a vision board session scheduled with we've got 48 girls, 52 boys. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
I know on a previous interview with you guys a couple of months ago, you raised the issue about vision boards as well.
Yes.
How important is a vision board? And for those people possibly watching us this morning, don't understand the concept behind a vision board and how important it is, so they don't have a Brian or they don't have a Wandile to teach them the importance of a vision board. Give us a quick lesson and the merits of a vision board.
Look, honestly, however old you are, a vision board is important. It's what Brian told me. You know, I all along had never had a vision board, but well, I did have a vision in mind, right?
It's about goal setting, is it not?
Exactly. You know, but now once you start putting it on a picture, you can already start envisioning, and you can already come up with affirmations every day you wake up.
It makes it easier.
Tell me how to put up a vision board in my bedroom, behind my bedroom door, or whatever the case may be.
You mean how do you start, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. I think that's the best way of saying it. Take 5, 10, 20 magazines, put them on the floor, and cut everything that looks nice on you. everything that looks nice
That
for
appeals to you.
That
That
appeals to
appeals
you.
to you.
Everything that looks so enticing to you, you cut it off. You cut
And
it off.
is
cut it
that,
off.
when you say appealing, is it supposed to be a want in your life? I want that, I'd like to have that, etc., etc.?
Look, you know what's nice about life? Sometimes you just don't really want something, don't really need something, and you still get it because life is so good. Life is beautiful, you know. So what I'm saying is, whatever entices you, whatever appeals to you, just cut it off. And then get a huge a card box if you can, because people will tell me, but I have to go buy this. You know how people like to make excuses. You don't have. You get up a cardboard and paste everything on the card box, according to what you think is right. So if you think you'd like to have 15 toilets in your house, come on, do it. If you want to have a car that looks so luxurious, come on, do it. If you want to go and watch...
So, okay, so
Yeah.
whatever it is that appeals to
Whatever it
you
is.
paste on
Yes.
this vision board, even if it's 100 little things.
Yes.
What next? What's the next step?
What's next then is once you have it, once you've seen the vision, it actually makes it easier for now to say, okay, my goal is to have this and that and that and that and that and that and
So
that.
do you do short and long-term goals?
So
or just
what
jot them down?
I normally tell young people, because you're still young to have short goals. So come on, don't rush life. You know, you're still young, you don't rush life. It's like a 20-year-old boy is gonna tell me, oh, I don't know what to do with my life. You're still 20. You don't have to rush anything. Most important thing is to have goals. Set yourself some goals and then follow the system. Follow your goals. Hang out with people who are actually in line with your goals. Do the things that are in line with your goals. Listen to the music and even watch the shows that are actually in line with your goals. Listen to Brian whenever you can. Read Brian's book whenever you can, because this is what will definitely put you in line with your goals.
Let's go from first-hand praise.
Yeah.
No problem.
We're talking about youth empowerment with two gentlemen who have been on the show here before. They are Wandile Mabaso and Brian Cole. In the previous show, they were discussing Brian's book. This time around, they are focusing on youth development. Wandile Mabaso and Brian Cole are in studio to talk about the Chaya and Zeus Foundation. It's an NPO and how they are making a difference in young people's lives. It's all about youth empowerment. But let's talk about the Money Book for High School Learners. What's that all about?
All right.
And how do you reach out to them? When you talk the Money Book to high school learners, you're not giving them the wrong idea, are you, in terms of if you read this book, if you follow these principles, you're able to become a millionaire overnight, for example?
All right. I'm grateful you touched on that. I normally say there's two things in life. It's either you make money, or you make excuses. It's very important that for my young people to understand that in life, there's only two options while you're growing up. Whether you're still at home, staying with your parents, or no matter what age, you always have to deal with money. It's either in life you're going to make money or you're going to make excuses. For me, my main focus is to teach these young people from high school. I mean, I started my own business when I was 12 years old. And when I started that business when I was 12 years old, because I didn't know nothing about money, I was just happy that I have business. I was happy that I had extra money to go to the Rennies to show with and all those nice, lovely things.
Right.
But I never really thought, I never knew what I actually had in my hand, you know? Until I was 18, 19, I had to go now look for work, and so I could pay for my school fees because my father had passed away. So now I started now really had to learn about what money is. Paying for my school fees, started 2 car washes, and then work at the same time. You know what I'm saying? So I generated a lot of money, saved up a lot of money. At 21 years old, I bought my first house. So all of that was because of all the skills that I had learned prior that, you know. But after that, I never actually learned a lot about money as an internal thing. I learned about money as an external thing.
So what's the difference?
So I lost it because I started being arrogant, too much ego. You think you know everything, and you stagnate. You stay in the same place for a long time, because now I have 2 car washes. Now they're making so much money. I think it's enough. But life doesn't work that way, you know. And after losing all of that, going back to work, I had to make the best of what I had at work. I became one of the best managers I've ever seen, according to myself, you know. But always, in everything that I did, I would always pass knowledge to my staff. I will always make sure that my staff knows exactly how to grow themselves. I mean, I used to pride myself by saying whoever has worked with me as a manager, wherever they are now, they are much more successful than I am, because I used to love doing that. So with the money book for high school students and beginners, I'm basically saying, can I teach you as young people how to manage money, how to dream about money, how to create a prosperity thinking. I say think king, think as a king, how to actually create a prosperity thinking mindset, because money is all in the mind. If you have the right ideas and if you're doing the right work, you always have money. So for me, that was very important. Goal setting, right prosperity thinking, and then
is
you
that
put
all
action
part
into it.
of the book, the money book?
It's
the
very-
vision board, the goal setting,
Yes.
part of the
Yes.
book.
When you first read the book, obviously I take you through the index, the whole context about what money is all about. Teach you what money, where money started. Then we go to the first chapter, and we start saying, you know what, we need to know what money is. Once you know what money is, now you need to know how much money do you need. So we say, how much money do you really need, and what do you know about money? Have you ever thought about that? Then once you've thought about how much money we really need, now we start cleansing your mind and say, no, it's not about how much money we need. What are your goals? Once you start writing your goals down, see, you know how many people say, I want to be a billionaire, and you're like, okay, you want to be a billionaire, but what are your goals? And then they start telling you your goals, but you're like, but your goals only need 200 million. You don't really need to be a billionaire. So you need to understand your mind and where you're going, and not try copy other people. So that's very important.
You're nodding your head in affirmation throughout the discussion.
All the time.
Your thoughts about money, and obviously you've read the book because you too have to go out with Brian.
Yeah, correct.
And you are reaching these learners. What's your role, and what's your understanding of the money book?
See, after reading the book, I could already change my whole concept around money, you know, because remember, what are we trying to build? We're trying to build a complete child, someone that has dreams and goals. Someone, after putting it on a vision board, can already start affirming some of the things that they want, you know, so...
applying.
And actually applying, you know, so...
What I worry about is I also do affirmations. Those billions hasn't come my way yet.
Yes.
Now, how disillusioning is it to a young person who has a vision board, who reads your book, who sets goals, and for 2 or 3 years, nothing happens, nothing changes in his or her life? Are they going to become disillusioned? Are they going to think this is mumbo jumbo, kick it aside and go their own way?
I think there's what we call the law of average. So if you understand the law of average, you know everything that you say, it's not going to help.
Positivity, attracting
It will
positivity.
definitely attract positivity, but it will never help everybody. So you'll work on your average. But the most important thing is you go to school and you have a teacher. You go to soccer and you have a coach. But when it comes to money, nobody wants to have a coach. So I'm saying it will never work because you don't want coaches. You need to come to Brian and let Brian coach you. Take you through the whole process of how you make affirmations. When do you say affirmation? Why do you say affirmations?
Tell us.
You know,
Tell us that maybe I'm saying my affirmations at the wrong time.
Exactly. I mean, first of all, most people when they wake up, they go straight to their phone. You know, and listen, when you wake up, the world is asking you, who are you? What do you want? When you wake up, the sun is shining, it's asking you, who are you and what do you want?
So what should I be saying?
And the first thing, you know what most people do? The first thing they do is grab their phones.
So you've got to be in gratitude rather than grabbing your phone. We have 2 minutes to wrap up.
Yes.
So let me go to you to say your final thoughts, and then I'll come back to you just to wrap up.
Hey, look, as young people, we face a lot of challenges. But it's not about that. You know, we can still change, we can still set goals and actually reach them. You know, why we actually started the foundation is for things like that. You know, you can never really say it's the end of the road. No, we are still dreaming. We are still...
And realizing your dreams.
Exactly.
Brian, very quickly you'll tell me right time and the type of affirmations you have to say. And final closing thought is, young people watching us today or other people who are looking for opportunities as well, realize that you guys are on a winning streak here in terms of not only your own lives, but the lives you're touching. How, and if they want to replicate your formula and reach out to you, would you help them start up a similar foundation?
Well, definitely. We are definitely working with other foundations. Definitely the Gift of the Givers. We're working with Rays of Hopes, working with the Easter End Feeding Scheme. So we are, and other small foundations, should they want to come up, we are there to say, if you're helping the country, we want those people.
Brilliant. So they can reach out to you.
Definitely they can.
You're going to give me your website
They
address?
can. They can go to They can go on Facebook, Chaya and Zeus Youth Foundation. On Instagram, Chaya and Zeus Youth Foundation, and they can speak to us, and we'll take it from there.
Before you go,
Yes.
the 3 most important things
Yeah.
and times, and what do you say when you are affirming?
True story.
Affirming yourself.
First of all, this is the best time. This is the best time to be physically alive right now on earth. So you wake up in the morning, I am grateful to be alive. I'm thankful for the blessings that you have given me, which I see or may not see. Open my eyes and guide me so I can follow through to the day. Let all of me come out as you have given all to me. So that's it.
And that's where we leave
That's it.
Thank you.
2 amazing young men talking to us about something that's very close to their hearts, and that is the Chaya and Zeus Foundation, reaching out to young people around the country. Well, they're reaching about 100 young people. If you want to replicate their model, please reach out to them and start making things happen in the community that you live in. In a short while, we're going to be doing a book review, so don't go away. We're now going to talk to Ravona Sauls. She's written a book entitled Hope. The book is being launched in February next year, and she hails from El Dorado Park. And undoubtedly, when she talks books and she talks about the title of the book, Hope, it's talking to people all around the world, because it's not only her unique situation or circumstances. I think it's about anybody who might be in a dark place or may be facing challenges. Let's hear what Ravona has to say about hope and how it can turn your life around. Morning, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank
Lovely
you so
to
much.
have you here. You've written a book called Hope.
Yes.
Why did you write the book?
I written the book because there's so many people out there who gets lost when they go through difficult times in their lives, and they just go backwards, or they think their lives are over and destroyed and they have nothing to live for. And I've written this book to show somebody that the difficult times in our lives doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of our lives. There's
Gives you an
still some-
opportunity to try something different, does
Yeah.
it not?
Yes.
How devastated were you? Because you told me off air that you worked with your husband for about 10 years to help him build his business, and then thereafter your marriage broke down. What did you do at that point? Obviously, when it meant the marriage had broken down, you disassociated yourself
Yeah.
from the business as well. So all of a sudden, your life is totally empty.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I thought my life was over. I couldn't see beyond what I was feeling at the moment. My life did not at that time make sense without him or without the life that we've built together. So I thought that was the end of me, that was it, that I've reached it and nothing else will come from me. And so it was during that time, it's all the pain and all the disappointment that just pushed out this book and made me see that your life can be something better without all of that. That your purpose can still prevail and you can still be purposeful towards other people and bring hope.
Did you think you had it in you to write a book?
And never.
So what made you go this step? I mean, it's a huge step.
Yeah.
I've threatened all my life to write a book, and I just have not gotten down to it
Yeah.
because I don't think I have it in me
Yeah.
to put pen to paper.
This is actually how it happened. I'm going to just tell you the truth. I didn't think that I was ever going to write a book. It was never part of my plan. It was never in my thoughts. I think this tragic time of my life pushed out the book, because somehow I found myself with a pen and a paper behind a desk, and I just started writing. And I didn't know how it came about. I didn't know how did I start writing. I just ended up writing, and I thought that it was pushed out by the pain. It pushed it out, and that's how I came to writing my book.
The book Hope.
Yeah.
Is it a story about your life? And are you not concerned that when you talk about your life, obviously it's your perspective,
Yes.
that your ex-husband or people that you mention in the book or events that you refer to in the book is going to upset them?
Well, actually, I tried not to have such in my book, because my book is not about other people. It's about me. And when I wrote it, I tried not to put me up there and put other people down there. So it shouldn't upset anybody. It should, in fact, inspire hope for everybody.
It's a pity you haven't brought a copy of the book with you, because I would love you to have read out one or two pages, or perhaps a chapter that appeals to you. So how many chapters is contained in the book, and what do the different chapters deal with?
Okay, it deals with hope, and it goes way back to when I was still a little girl, and I didn't really understand what life was all about, but I had something in me that always told me, you're going to be greater. And as I grew up, that voice kind of disappeared, because then I became a wife, I became a mother, and my life was devoted to that part of my life, which I thought was the only part of my life.
But that was your whole world.
That was my world. But when this thing happened in my life, it made me to go back and back and back to this little girl who had these dreams, who had this hope. And my life, the book speaks about the journey of how I came to connect to my hope once again, and how I am now living it every day of my life.
All little girls, myself included, when I was a little girl, had dreams, hopes, wishes, aspirations, but they don't necessarily turn out as we'd hoped when we were little girls.
Yes.
What were your dreams?
Well, I knew, and this is something that's in my book, because I wrote about it. I knew that there was something special about me.
Wow.
I could never fit in with the crowds, with my friends, with my immediate community. I struggled to fit in. Although I was relatable, I just never could fit in. And I knew there was something different about me. I knew I had something special inside of me. From where I come from, if I have to say my family, we're not people who write books. Where I come from, we're not people who write and launches books. But somehow, I didn't know at the time it was going to be a book. I just knew it is something special and something big. So when I look at my life, I see a big picture. It's not specific, but I know this greatness that's there. I'm supposed to be great, and it only kind of like opens up over time. Like now I'm sitting on the show. For me, this is a moment of, I sense this is something that I dreamt about as a little girl.
Wow, thank you indeed. When did you realize that all of your writing, you were writing in pain, you were writing in disappointment, you were writing in a very, very dark place of your life. When did you realize that all of these writings that you'd put together over time is the making of a book?
When I finished the book, then I was like, wow, I finished a book.
But you didn't consciously sit down to write a book. You were just sitting and writing your pain. You were giving expression to the pain you were feeling. And how long did it take you to do that?
It took me a few months to write my book, finished, complete. When I started, like I said, I didn't know I was busy writing a book. And when I was done,
you were just putting pen to paper. You were just expressing what you were feeling.
Yes, I was just writing. And it was never part of my plan. And to tell you the truth, I don't think that if the divorce did not happen, that I would have written a book.
How painful was the divorce? Without casting aspersions
Yeah.
on anyone, I'm sure
Yeah.
as painful as it might have been, there's still a level of respect
Yes.
between your ex-husband and yourself.
Yes.
So how painful was it that it pushed you to the point of writing about your anguish?
I would say it's the same kind of pain that you would feel when you go to give birth. Honestly speaking, I think somehow, you know, it's like destiny. Somehow, God just knew that I was never going to write a book if I didn't get to that point of pain, because it was the pain that caused me to push this book. And I said many things you can start in life. There are certain things that you may have to birth. And for me, I had to birth this book. That's the kind of pain that I was feeling at the time.
All right, I asked you a little earlier on
Yeah.
about how many chapters the book
Yes.
contains and the titles of the chapters.
Okay, I have about 12 chapters in my book. It deals with various aspects pertaining to hope. So it would have Momentum of Hope.
That's the title of the
This
chapter.
is a title. I'm just giving to you. It's Momentum of Hope. We have a birthing process, which is how hope births things within your life. I have a chapter that is called Faith Up. Where you
Okay,
have to level
hold that
up.
thought. Let's go for an ad break. I'm talking to a very hopeful young woman. Her name is Ravona Salt. She's written a book entitled Hope, and she does say that there is life after divorce or any disappointment that you go through in life. It gives you a new lease on life. The book is entitled Hope. The author is Ravona Sauls. She hails from Eldorado Park in Johannesburg, and that alone tells you that if you're hopeful, any situation or condition can change.
That's right.
And obviously I use that as a reference because we know the moment we say Eldorado Park, the connotations attached to that, and that doesn't say that all of it is probably a bad area, or all of the people that live there are involved in nefarious activities. We know that they're just pockets of bad activities that happens not only in Eldorado Park, but whether you're in a township or whether you're in the suburbs, you have the same situations playing out. So with due respect to you and all people that come and hail from that part of the world. And I also go on about it because I'm trying to show that it doesn't matter where you live, what your circumstances are, how you've grown up. If you have hope, you can overcome.
That's right.
And you've just expressed that with your book, Hope. So tell us about a few more chapters of the book and who should be reading the book.
Okay, the book should be written by basically everybody.
Should be read by everybody.
Should be read by basically everybody. You could be in a bad place right now in your life and need a boost of hope. You could be in a good place right now and realize, hey, I can be at a better place in my life.
So what is the book? Which chapter is going to talk to me? Let's assume someone's reading the book and they're really in a bad place. They're going through a divorce, or they have financial difficulties, or they can't find a job. Which chapter is going to give them hope?
I would say it would be the birthing process of how... Because it deals with the part of my life where I was really, really broken. And it explains how pain is needed and necessary for certain things to be birthed in your life. To understand that pain sometimes is necessary. We go through stuff, but it is there to take us to the next level of our lives.
And make you appreciate the better things or the finer things or the little things in your life.
Yes.
How do you end the book?
My book ends basically with, it ends with a prayer. It ends with a prayer that I pray over myself and everybody that reads it. It ends where you have now gone through my journey and where I'm now, and I'm hoping that you can see how I have overcome and how I have not allowed myself to be overcome by pain and circumstances, how I've used it for the better purpose. So it ends with a prayer where I pray that whoever reads it will experience or get to experience hope in the same way that I've experienced it in my life.
I like when you talk about the birthing process and the pain, because that indicates that if you don't face challenges or go through challenges, it's God's way. Challenges in our lives are God's way of making us bigger, better and stronger, and to be able to appreciate the little things in life which we take for granted. So, and it does make you bigger, better and stronger, undoubtedly. You also sound like a very spiritual person. Do you think your spirituality, your belief in God has enabled you to be where you are?
Most definitely. I don't think that if I didn't trust God that I would be able to sit here or even just view or have the perception of pain in a positive way if it was not for my belief and my faith in God.
What about bitterness? A lot of people who go through pain find it very difficult to forgive, and they end up being terribly, terribly bitter. Do you address that in the book, and how do you address it?
Yes, I do speak about unforgiveness and bitterness. I do address it because sometimes if we have to look at the heart is the organ within our bodies that contains the blood and pushes through blood through the rest of our body. Yes. The heart is also the place where we harbor a lot of bitterness and unforgiveness and
regret, sorrow,
and all of that.
Not being able to let go.
Yes. So if that is in our heart, it's going to eventually flow through the rest of our lives. Whatever we do, that's what our heart is going to send out. So if we don't deal with what we put inside of our hearts, we're going to contaminate the rest of our life or every part of our lives. So when I do speak about unforgiveness and bitterness, although it is very hard to forgive, it is very hard to resist bitterness and to resist resentment and all of that, it is something that is very necessary for your healing and for your growth. You're never going to go forward until you actually release that bitterness and unforgiveness, and you're not going to be healed. I would not be sitting here if I did not forgive.
Easier said than done. Do you have a process? Do you have advice to people as how do you overcome the hurt? How do you overcome the bitterness? What is it that you say to yourself to let go and say, I forgive?
I think mostly it has to do with how you see things. I think a lot of things that goes on in our lives, it has to do with perception. It's how you see. If I look at the hurt as something negative, then I'm going to naturally just not forgive or naturally be bitter towards you. But if I look at what you've done as, okay, you have done something like this to me, and I'm not saying anybody has done anything, I'm just saying if you have done something, and I look at it from a positive, okay, maybe you've done this, maybe it's time for me to do something else. I shift it to a positive thing, and it helps me then not to focus on what you've done. In that way, I don't need to harbor unforgiveness. Yes.
You look at that action
as an opportunity.
You look at the action of that person who has knowingly or unknowingly hurt you, and you try and justify, try and understand the why he or she did it.
Yes, basically.
Because whatever their circumstances were. So you try to understand that.
Yes.
And that then makes it easier for you to overcome your hurt, your bitterness, and to be able to forgive the person.
Yes. And also because if I have to look at, okay, if you hurt me, if I have to put it this way, if you hurt me, I have to look at, okay, is this an opportunity for me to grow in forgiveness and say, I'm a better person, I'm going to forgive you. It just makes me a better person. So instead of it being an offense, I look at it as an opportunity to grow myself and say, I'm going to forgive you. It makes me a better person. So I don't need to harbor unforgiveness if I choose to look at what you've done as a stepping stone for me to becoming greater. I think
Now,
so.
the book's going to be launched next month.
Yes.
You've also told me that you've given a couple of copies out to
Yes.
friends and relatives just to read and to give you feedback.
Yes.
And thus far, you've received lots of positive
Yes.
feedback.
Yes.
So where and how is the book being launched? Where do we buy it and what does it cost?
Okay, my book is going to be launched in February. It costs 150 Rand. And if you would like to purchase a copy, you can just contact me on my details. If should I give it to them?
Please do.
It's Ravona Souls, and you can get me on Facebook. I'm Virtues. And you can also get me, I can give you my number.
All right, let's just leave the Facebook address. It's not going to be available at bookstores.
No, unfortunately not, because it's self-published. You'll have to contact me if you need a copy, yeah.
Now, undoubtedly, you sound extremely positive sitting here
Yes.
and talking to me about it. You know that you've got a sure seller on your hands.
Yeah.
Does that mean there's another book in the pipeline?
I hope so. I hope so. I think this has just made me realize that, you know what, it's in you. You can do this. You can write, you can speak, you can do interviews. Yeah, I mean, what's stopping me from doing that?
You wrote your first book,
Yeah.
Hope, out of the anguish,
Yeah.
the hurt, the bitterness, the disappointment of your broken marriage. Do you think that, and obviously that motivated you to write the book, do you think that your next book is going to be motivated by other events in your life?
The way I feel right now, I can write a book right now.
Oh, good on you, girl.
I can write a book right now, and it can be based on just anything that I have to say right now, just to spread hope, just to spread some sort of joy and believe into people that they can achieve their
It's
dreams.
given you a lot of confidence,
Yes,
has it not?
it has.
Writing and publishing this book has given you loads of confidence.
Yes.
You now feel you can go out into the world and conquer the
Yes.
world. If you had gotten bad reviews, would that have broken you down?
I think it would have made me feel a bit down, but it should spur a desire to say, okay, this is negative, but it should only make me write it again and do better. That's what it should have done. Yeah.
Are you working at the moment?
No, I'm not. Currently, I am just writing this book, and I want to launch out as someone who writes and speaks to different people, women, youth, even men, if I can. I'm hoping one day God will give me the opportunity to even speak to men, and that's what I intend to do.
Well, I wish you well on the rest of your journey, and good luck. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much.
And hopefully we will catch up with you at some stage in the future and see what else
Yeah.
you have achieved on life's journey.
Yes. Thank you so much.
And that's it for the show this morning. Thank you indeed for being with me. Yes, as you can hear, I'm still trying to overcome this terrible flu that's been plaguing me for the past 3 weeks. That being said, I'd like to thank you for being with me on this show. Don't forget to join me at the same time on Saturday morning. Until then, as always, take care on the roads, and it is Khudafez from me, Julie Alli.